So if you have ever been at that point in your life where you are the person that your friends call when they're in grave and imminent danger, you know how good it feels. I mean, you know how good it feels to provide for people. I was that for a while, and probably you have been too. I mean, you probably even remember your favorite phone call, which came from a woman with whom you were so close you consider a little sister. A woman with whom you were so close you actually share a nickname. And in the 3 words she said when she called you, which were, Flo, I'm fucked, you knew what had happened. You knew that your friend had spent all of her financial resources on some emotional investments in Central America, and now she was home and at Kennedy Airport, broke and about to cry, and you just said, Flo, it's cool. Hang tight, I got you. I'll pick you up. You can live with me for a little while. And then she did. And then you had this hula hooping hippie love bomb living in your apartment, leaving teeny tiny bikini parts like carnage all over your formerly tardy family, And when she started using your expensive face products, you didn't mention it. You didn't even get mad, for reasons I'll explain later. In August of 2010, I felt like shit, which is not unusual after working a summer on Cape Cod in the restaurant industry. So my first day off after working 38 days in a row, I decided to do the most healthy thing I could think to do, which is I took the ferry to Boston, and I spent the day with my friend Rachel eating sprouts and doing yoga, because those are the healthy things to do. And I realized in one position I had my arms up over my head, and in that position I actually couldn't breathe. My throat had closed off. And so I let my fingers sort of float down and acknowledge these alien golf balls that had been forming on the sides of my throat. Rachel looked at me and she was like, oh yeah, I noticed those. And I was like, yeah, what do you think they are? And she was like, I don't know, but go to a doctor. Whatever you do, don't try and diagnose yourself on the internet. WebMD is just going to tell you that you have cancer. Is this where your cancer is? Sarah kisses me on my right supraclavicle lymph node, the unbiopsied one. Sarah drives up from Philadelphia to be with me after my first chemotherapy treatment. Sarah brings me a painting of a fucked up dream catcher. She says it'll stop my fucked up nightmares. Sarah offers to execute radical hairstyles. Really, she says, when do you have the chance? Before it all falls out. You're never going to have a chance to have a mohawk. Sarah tells me to focus on a question while I shuffle her tarot cards. And when she pulls over the last card of my 9-card reading, it's a card of the long-term future. That card is the world. Oh, this is really good, Sarah says. And she tells me that the card means love everything, know everything, forgive everything. I assume that Sarah thinks that I've asked the cards about my health, when in fact, of course, I've just asked them about my love life. Casey, my cosmic mechanic ex-boyfriend, sets me up a meditation consultant with a guy named Dick, who's certified in a technique called TAT, and we were going to see if any of his processes could help me through my journey. And when I met with Dick, Dick asked me how I felt about my diagnosis. Was I angry? And I was like, no, not angry, more like, what? It had been a really weird couple of years, which had included finalizing my divorce, a car accident, having Lyme disease, breaking both my ankles, getting arrested, having pneumonia, And now this, lymphoma, which is not lung disease, which you get from smoking, which I did, or skin cancer, which you get from hanging out in the sun all the time, which I also did. But lymphoma, it's a cancer without reason. And I said, Dick, I just wonder, like, what is the universe trying to tell me in these increasing levels of severity that I'm not listening to? And Dick said, Cyndi, that's none of your fucking business. And I was like, what? And he was like, no, really, like, if you need to tell yourself, like, if you need to realize or think that you have cancer because of some fucked up thing you did to your brother when you were 8, by all means, like, have at it, like, tell yourself that story. But the fact is, like, if you were meant to be trekking through Nepal, you'd be trekking through Nepal. And if you were meant to be in a trailer in Alabama raising 17 children, you'd be there. But you're not. You're here, you live on Cape Cod, and you have cancer. And the energy that you spend trying to figure out why this is happening is far better spent trying to spend your days as gracefully and as beautifully as you can. This is an integral part of shaving. Mark holds a wet, warm washcloth over my head. Mark is my Aunt Peggy's boyfriend, and he and I have always gotten along really well, except for this one period when I lived with him in my 20s, when I had taken to surreptitiously shaving my legs with his Mach 3 razor. When he realized why his razors were going dead so quickly, he had to do that weird thing where, like, someone you like is doing something that you don't like, and he was like, it's just that the blades are really expensive. I mean, could you stop? And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, of course. But I didn't. And for the next few weeks, my legs stayed silky and smooth while his face stayed slightly razor burned. When my hair did start to fall out, I took the advice of my new cancer friends and shaved it. They said, there's so little control you have in this life, in this situation. If you just watch it fall out, you're just gonna be depressed. So I did, I buzzed it, but it was like kind of patchy and sort of Auschwitz-y. So when I decided to go full Telly Savalas, I sought the advice of someone who knew about shaving. Why are we doing this? I asked Mark about the cloth on my head, and he said, I don't know, it opens the pores or something. When Mark was done shaving my head, I was the proud owner of what I convinced myself could be a fetishizable Star Trek look. And Mark and I both looked down at the razor in his hand at the same time. I said, I'm going to pay you back for your razor blades. And he just said it was a pleasure and an honor to shave your head. So chemotherapy for me was like this. Like you're walking down the street, and then someone comes along behind you and they shove you into a manhole and they put the cover on, and then you're just sort of down there, right? And then like eventually someone comes along and they take the cover off, and you're like, oh, the light. But by then you're like physically and spiritually atrophied. You don't actually want to climb out, but you do, because you can't just fucking stay down there, right? So you climb out, and then you take 3 steps down the street again, and then someone does it again. And that was the way the process went. So when I had my first cancer management meeting with my new oncologist, they explained to me about chemotherapy. It, among other things, it knocks out your white blood cells, so your immune system is gone. So they were like, okay, so you can't go to the gym. You shouldn't travel. You shouldn't go on public transportation. You shouldn't really like exchange fluids with people. So like making out and sex is like off the table. You also shouldn't hang around with children. puppies, and when your counts get really, really low, you can't even eat raw vegetables. You've got to boil them until they're really limp, so to kill all the pathogens. And they said, like, okay, do you have any questions? And I was like, yeah, I got a fucking question. Okay, so like, no travel, no museums, no gym, no puppy, sex, or vegetables. Like, that's what I do, okay? So like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And they said, get really comfortable with your couch and your television. And I said, all right, well, that's fine, but like at the time I hadn't had couch or television since 1994 when I decided there were better things to do. Like, I don't want you to get me wrong. I'm not one of these like, woo woo, like I love my fucking life, annoying people. But I do actually believe that you get one go around, so like you might as well get into it, right? So that day I went home and I was really depressed, and I sent a mass email to all of my friends, and it just said, guys, I'm fucked. Like, I've got to sit a season out. Could you guys like kind of live for me? And in case they didn't know what that meant, I gave them a list of things to do. I was like, could you just like fart in yoga class and like smile at people with lipstick on your teeth and like find yourself simultaneously nauseous and horny because you just ate 4 dozen raw oysters at once? And I mean, like, buy a ton of expensive shoes that you're never gonna actually wear and have like drunken makeout sessions on the beach and get in fights with strangers about politics. And like, when that big fat guy sits down next to you on the bus and he's drinking like an extra large coffee from Dunkin' Donuts that's like hazelnut flavored, just feel how much you hate him the whole way through, and then smile, because like you get to ride the bus, and like the little things to you are really big to me right now. So just do it and like tell me about it, okay? I got so many wonderful responses to that email. By far my favorite came from my friend Frank, who sent me a login and a password to his secret Gmail account. And he said, you can log in there. Don't make any sound and don't touch the sides, and if I see any evidence that you've been in there, I'll kill you. So of course I log in, and in this Gmail account are all of his exchanges with this woman who is not his wife. They emailed each other like teenagers in heat. And I remember reading them and thinking, like, if I could have had affairs this hot, I would have stayed married. So naturally I have all these questions, like, are you having an affair or is it really just an e-fair? And like, does your wife know about this? Do you have some sort of arrangement? And like, is she really that flexible, or is she just really good at Photoshop? So I emailed Frank and I'm like, hey, like, can I ask a few questions about this, or am I just meant to be a voyeur here? And he emailed me back not with any answers, but just with transcripts of what they typed to each other while having video sex with the sound shut off. And so, little by little, with a lot of help from a lot of my friends, I got through my winter. Then I finished chemo, and I had a month off between finishing chemo and starting radiation. And in that month, my hair came back in these like adorable little blonde ringlets, and I went back to the gym, and I remember the first day, like, I ran a mile on the treadmill, and like I could eat again, and I was enviably thin. You want to like make your goal weight without doing anything? Chemo, seriously. I even went on a blind date with a really nice Turkish man named Alp, and I didn't even tell him that I had cancer. And then I started radiation. And radiation for me, so chemotherapy was more invasive than radiation, but for me, radiation was scarier. You get strapped down to a board, and then these lasers get lined up to your radiation tattoos, and then you get like rolled into a thing, and then this buzzing sound happens, and I could actually like taste the cells burning at the back of my throat. And I had chemo once a week, but radiation was every single day. And I met with my radiation technicians daily, obviously, but I met with my radiation doctor once a month on Mondays. And one Monday, my doctor, Mary Louise Stevenson, asked me about my side effects. And I stated kind of the usual, like sore throat, itchy, burning kind of thing, and like a cough, and, all these sort of normal radiation things. And then I said I'd been having night sweats, which scared me because I'd had them before I was diagnosed. They're sort of a symptom of lymphoma. And Mary Louise Stevenson said to me, well, when was your last period? This was May. And I said, I don't know, July? It's really hard to tell if something's not normal when everything's not normal. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, like July. And she said, well, that would make you sweat at night, wouldn't it? The summer before I was diagnosed, I worked primarily as a breakfast cook. I fried a lot of eggs. Like I probably fried 8 dozen eggs a day. And I fry them in the French style, which is like you get the oil hot enough so it's almost smoking, and right before it smokes you crack your egg in, and then you flip it, and so you can serve an egg that is like crispy on the edges but the yolk is still really supple and soft. It's a beautiful way to eat an egg. And probably at least twice a day some entitled tourist would come out to my pass window, and I've got like 8 burners going with all these eggs, and someone would be like, excuse me, how do you get your eggs so crispy? And I got so annoyed, I just got to the point where I just turned to them in deadpan, I'm 34. So, Dr. Louise Stevenson, Mary Louise Stevenson, that would make you sweat at night, wouldn't it? And I said, what? And she said, you're 35. That's young for menopause. It's even young for perimenopause, but chemotherapy is hard on all your organs, and especially your ovaries, and you're not 20. And in that moment, I felt like 2 things at once. One was just like this weird respect that like an actual female doctor would drop the M-bomb on me with no bedside manner whatsoever. And the second was, and this is embarrassing, but it's part of the story, that like throughout this whole process of like being sick and going through that whole thing, I had started to harbor this weird rescue fantasy that I would somehow meet this like really rich man, and with all his money he would wipe away all of my problems, and I could live out my dream life on the North Shore of Boston as like a pampered housewife and mother with a full-time au pair, so I could still have my art studio and still go out to lunch and all of that. And the fact that I was now robbed of my reproductive capacity was kind of a straw that broke the camel's back. So I started my walk back to the T. From Beth Israel back to the T, and I walked up Massachusetts Avenue. And in that moment, I hadn't let myself cry since I got my diagnosis, because I was afraid if I started crying, I wouldn't ever be able to stop. But in that moment, like, I gave myself permission to actually just have at it. I was old, sick, exhausted, broke as hell. I didn't have a job. I didn't have my own place to live. Let's just face it, I was probably beyond thin and like into emaciated and scary. I had nowhere to go. I'd been a burden to my friends and my family for an entire year. And so I started to cry. And I did all the kinds of crying. Like I started the crying where you're just keening, where you're like, ah! And then I started the crying where you just sort of choking out, where you're like, and then I like started the crying where you realize that you're walking on Mass Ave in Boston and you're like crazy person crying on the street. So that's the kind of crying where you're like trying to keep it in, but you can't, so it still spills out. So you're all the self-pity I had wanted for this entire year, I was like, and then for some reason, I looked up, and my walk took me past the Mass College of Art, and there was this woman walking towards me. I'm sure you know the type. She was an art school girl. She was dressed kind of like dirty and grungy and androgynous, and she was gorgeous, and she was just like vibrating with like wacky abstraction and creative energy, and like she had her headphones in and she was just bopping along, and I was like, oh my God, like I know this woman, like I've met her, where is she from? And I was like trying to process, like I know her from somewhere, I've met her. And it took me probably half a block to realize that who she reminded me of was actually me 18 years earlier. And so I stopped crying and I started thinking about her. And I started thinking about like all the art that she would make and all the places she would travel and all the people she would kiss and all the trouble she would cause and like maybe even the daughter she would get to have one day. And then I stopped crying, and I actually, and you'll never hear me say this about the fucking city again, but like I looked around Boston, and Boston actually looked kind of pretty. And then this crazy thing happened. As she walked past me, her arm shot out and she grabbed me by the shoulder and she said, my God, I love your hair. That's the story. I actually have like a mini postscript to the story. Probably 5 years after that day, my period came back. Hi, strangers. Now you know this. But a year ago, I gave birth to my son, Luke, who is the most amazing, magical baby ever to grace the planet. So shit turns around, you know?